I've been trying very hard not to say this, but I have officially ran out of effort. I love you. I have loved you from the very first day.
You ever do something so small, so completely ordinary, that you almost didn't do it at all? Sign for a package. That's it. 2 seconds of your day. That's all it took to unravel 2 years of my life. I want you to stop whatever you're doing right now. Because what I'm about to tell you, I still can't say it out loud without my hands going cold. He texted me that morning. Said he was sick. Said a delivery was coming in. Said, and I remember every single word, "You're literally the only person I trust with anything." You know that, right? I smiled at my phone like an idiot. I signed for the box. I carried it to his desk. And then I turned it over. The return address. A city he had never once mentioned to me. A name I didn't recognize. And something else, something so small, so easy to miss, that I almost walked away without seeing it. I didn't walk away, and what I found in the next 72 hours didn't just end a relationship. It exposed something that had been hiding in plain sight for longer than I had even been alive. Stay with me, because this story goes places I never saw coming, and neither will you. Let me take you back 3 years. My name is Solène. I'm 34. I work in brand partnerships at a creative agency, the kind of place with exposed brick walls and oat milk in the fridge, and everyone acts like they're saving the world by redesigning cereal boxes. I loved it. I had been there 4 years when Callum joined. Callum Adair, 38, head of new business development. Originally from Belfast, raised partly in Toronto, which gave him this accent that landed somewhere between charming and impossible to place. He wore good shoes, not flashy, just good. The kind of detail you notice when you're not trying to notice anything. He walked into the Monday brief and spent the entire 45 minutes asking the exact right questions. Not to impress, not to perform. He genuinely wanted to understand the work. I thought, this one is different. I know. But hear me out, because the most dangerous kind of wrong is the kind that feels completely right for a very long time. We became friends first. That part was real. I need you to know that. 3 months of coffee runs and shared complaints about the same impossible client. He remembered things. Not in a calculated way, in the way people do when they're actually listening. My grandmother's name. The city I'd always wanted to visit, but kept putting off. The fact that I ate the same lunch 4 days a week because I was a creature of comfort, and I was fine with that. He made me feel, and this is the part that still stings the most, he made me feel like being known was safe. The first time he told me he had feelings for me, we were standing outside the building at 7:30 after a pitch prep that ran 4 hours long. It was raining, not dramatically. Just the quiet city kind that blurs the streetlights. He said, "I've been trying very hard not to say this, and I've officially run out of effort." I laughed. He didn't. And that, right there, was the moment I was in trouble. For 14 months we were, in the truest sense of the word, partners, inside the office and out. And let me remind you that real betrayal doesn't announce itself. It doesn't come from someone who seems wrong from the beginning. It comes from someone who seemed like the answer. And inside that perfect, curated, completely convincing love story, the cracks started to show. First crack, his phone. I want to talk about the phone thing, because I've heard so many people describe this exact moment, and they all say the same thing. It's not that they looked at the phone. It's that the phone changed. Callum had always been relaxed about his. He'd hand it to me mid-sentence to show me something. Leave it on the table between us at dinner without a second thought. That ease, that openness, was part of what made me feel safe with him. Then one evening, somewhere around the 16-month mark, I reached across the couch for his phone to change the music, and he picked it up first, casually, like he just happened to grab it, like it was nothing, except it happened again the next week, and the week after that. The second crack was the travel. Callum traveled for work. It came with the role. He'd fly out for prospect meetings, come back with stories about airports and hotel gym workouts and bad conference sandwiches. Normal. But I started noticing that when I asked where he was going, the answers got softer. Vaguer. Northwest region. A referral lead. Nothing's confirmed yet. It might not even happen. Not lies, exactly. Just information with the edges filed off. And I, because I believed in him, because I had invested something real, accepted the filed edges. I told myself, he's under pressure. He's building something big. He doesn't want to jinx it. The third crack, the one I couldn't explain away no matter how many ways I tried, came on a Saturday. We were doing nothing. The comfortable kind of nothing that happens when two people are fully at ease with each other. He was reading. I was half watching something on the television. His phone vibrated on the coffee table. He glanced at it, and his face did something I had never seen it do before. Not panic, not guilt. Something softer than that. Something that looked, from where I was sitting, like relief. He picked up the phone, typed something quickly, set it back down. "Everything okay?" I asked. Work thing." He went back to his book. I went back to the television. But I wasn't watching it. I was sitting with this feeling I didn't have a name for yet. This quiet, low-frequency wrongness that I hadn't been given enough information to call anything at all. I didn't snoop. I want to be clear about that. Not because snooping is the worst thing a person can do in that situation, but because I genuinely wasn't there yet. I still trusted him. What I did, almost without deciding to, was start paying attention differently. And paying attention differently is how you eventually find the things you were never supposed to find. 3 weeks later, his text arrived. "Hey, not feeling great. Package might come in today. Sign for it if it shows up. You're literally the only person I trust with anything. You know that, right?" I typed back, "Of course." I didn't know. I genuinely did not know that those 2 words were the beginning of the end. The delivery came at 11:30. Standard brown box, medium-sized. Bubble wrap rustling faintly inside when I picked it up. I signed the courier's tablet, thanked him, and turned toward Callum's office. I was going to set it on his desk and go back to my lunch. That's all I was going to do. But the box shifted when I turned, and I caught the return label under the overhead light, and I stopped. The return address was residential. Not a company, not a warehouse, a house number, a street name. A city in a state that Callum had mentioned precisely once, in passings 8 months earlier, in the context of a client trip he said had fallen through. The name above the address, Reverie Ashcroft. I said it in my head 3 times before I understood why it snagged. And then I remembered, 14 months ago, early in our relationship, his phone had lit up face up on his nightstand. I hadn't meant to see it, and I caught the first 2 words of a notification before the screen went dark. Reverie says, I had asked who Reverie was. He said, "Old friend. We grew up near each other." Completely relaxed about it. Not a flicker. I forgot about it within the week. Standing there with that box in my hands, 14 months later, I remembered it in full. I carried the box to his desk. I set it down. I walked back to my own. and I opened a browser tab I never thought I'd open. I searched her name, Reverie Ashcroft. She wasn't difficult to find. She was a textile artist. Her website was beautiful. Linen tones, hand-stitched aesthetic, the kind of work that takes years to develop. She'd been featured in 2 craft publications, 14,000 Instagram followers. She was talented. She was around our age. And buried in the About section of her website, she mentioned growing up near Belfast. Same as Callum, I told myself it was coincidence. I closed the tab. I ate my lunch. I did not think about Reverie Ashcroft for the rest of the afternoon. I thought about her for the entire night. And the next morning, before Callum arrived, I went much, much deeper. I want to be honest about what I found and how I found it. Because I think people tell these stories and skip the part where they question themselves the entire time. Every search I ran, I second-guessed. Every connection I made, I tried to argue myself out of. But the evidence didn't care about my discomfort. First, I looked at our company's expense submission system, which I had access to through my role. Callum submitted his own travel expenses, but the category codes flagged to shared reports I'd seen in passing. I pulled the last 12 months. 6 trips, all coded business development, prospect. For 4 of them, I cross-referenced the travel dates against our agency's new business tracker. The live document where every prospect and lead got logged the moment contact was made. 4 trips, 0 corresponding entries. He had charged the company for 4 trips that existed nowhere in any business pipeline. I sat with that for a long time. Because that wasn't a relationship problem anymore. That was something else entirely. Second, I went back to her Instagram. She posted regularly. Studio work, finished pieces, market stalls. A life that looked full and warm and intentional. I went back 8 months. And there, in a grid of otherwise solitary studio shots, 1 photograph, a cafe table, 2 cups of coffee, shot from above, the way people do when they want to share a moment, without sharing who they're with. Caption, favorite kind of Tuesday. Location tag, her city. Date. The same week, Callum had taken one of those uncorroborated business trips. You could argue it was coincidence. You could argue a lot of things when you love someone. But I had run out of arguments. Third, and this is the part that made everything else irrelevant, I reached out to my colleague Ren. Ren had been at the agency 2 years before me. She knew everyone, remembered everything, and had the diplomatic instinct to deliver hard truths in the gentlest possible way. I asked if we could talk. Privately, not at the office. We met for coffee that evening. I told her everything I had found. She listened without interrupting, which is rare, and which told me she already had something to say. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Solène, there's something I need to tell you, and I need you to know I've been wrestling with whether to say it for about 4 months. Before you and Callum got together," she said carefully, "he was seeing someone." She wanted me to know, not to cause problems, just so someone knew, that she had found out after the fact that he'd been seeing someone else the entire time they were together. A woman he'd known a long time, Ren said. Someone not connected to the agency. Someone he'd known a long time, from back home. Reverie Ashcroft wasn't a new secret. She was an old one. And I understood now, with complete and devastating clarity, the latest in a pattern that predated me entirely. I drove home that night with my hands steady on the wheel. Not because I wasn't in pain, but because something had arrived that was bigger than the pain. Purpose. I gave myself 48 hours. Not to cool down. I was already cold. The kind of cold that is the opposite of anger, that is actually just absolute clarity. 48 hours to decide what I wanted from this. Because here's what I knew. I could confront him emotionally. I could show up and make him explain himself. And he would. He was skilled at explaining. He would find the words that made just enough sense to leave me uncertain. Or I could do it differently. I chose differently. I made an appointment with HR, not accusatory, factual. I had documented evidence of expense fraud. That was a compliance issue, regardless of anything happening between us personally. I walked in with printed records, travel dates, expense codes, the discrepancy between claimed business trips and zero pipeline activity. I was professional. I was precise. I did not cry. HR opened a formal review within 24 hours. Then, and only then, I went to Callum. Not at the office. I texted and asked him to come over that evening. He had no idea anything was wrong. He came with a bottle of wine and that smile. The Belfast-Toronto smile that had undone me from the very beginning. He sat down on my couch. I sat across from him. I said, I need to ask you something, and I need you to tell me the truth, not a version of it. The whole thing, he said. Of course, you can always. Reverie Ashcroft, 3 seconds of silence, which was all I needed. Because an innocent man doesn't take 3 seconds. He breathed out through his nose. And then he did something I hadn't expected. He told me the truth, all of it. He and Reverie had been involved, on and off, for nearly 7 years. She was, by his own words, the relationship he couldn't end and couldn't commit to. They had never lived in the same city, never been officially together. But they had never fully stopped either. She knew about me, not my name. But she knew there was someone, and he had let that continue for 14 months. The package, he explained quietly, was a birthday gift she had made for him by hand. He'd given her the office address. Because he didn't want it arriving at the home, we'd effectively started sharing. He looked at me when he finished. I think he expected me to cry, or shouted neither. I know about HR, I said. His face changed. I know about the expense reports. I know about the trips. And I know about Demi. He opened his mouth. Don't, I said. He left 20 minutes later, without the wine. Here's what the revenge fantasy version of this story skips. The part where you sit in your apartment at 2 a.m. and you miss him anyway. Because you don't stop loving someone the moment you discover who they really are. That's not how it works. The love and the betrayal exist at the same time, in the same chest, and they are both completely real. I had 3 weeks that were genuinely hard. I'm not going to dress that up. Ren checked on me every couple of days. Not with pity. Just presence. Which is the only thing that actually helps. Callum was suspended pending investigation. The agency's finance team confirmed 4 fraudulent expense claims totaling just over $5,000 submitted against non-existent business development activity. He resigned before the formal outcome. And that, I thought, was the end of the story. Except, 6 weeks after Callum resigned, I received an email, no subject line. Just a name I recognized in the sender field. Reverie Ashcroft. I stared at it for a long time before I opened it. It was long, longer than I expected. And it was, I want to say this carefully, one of the most honest things anyone has ever written to me. She had found out everything. Not from Callum. From a mutual contact who had heard the story move through the industry. The way things travel in creative fields. She wrote that she had known about me. Not specifically, but the existence of someone. That she had believed him when he framed their arrangement as something old and fading. She wrote that she had finally fully ended things. that she felt implicated in something she hadn't fully consented to, that she was sorry, not the way people say it to deflect, but in the way of someone genuinely reckoning with their own part in something complicated. And then, at the very end of the email, she wrote something I have read many times since. She wrote, "He told each of us that we were the one who truly understood him. I think that was the only true thing he ever said, because he needed all of us to believe it to keep running from himself." I read that line 4 times. He didn't have a villain's calculation. He had a coward's architecture, and we, all of us who loved him, had been load-bearing walls in a structure he built to avoid ever having to choose. I wrote back to Reverie, short, gracious, honest. We are not friends. I don't think we need to be. But something shifted in writing that email. Something that had been clenched for weeks finally let go. And then, 3 months after Callum left, the thing nobody in my life saw coming, including me, a senior partner called me into his office. He told me that in reviewing the accounts Callum had been managing, they had discovered something. The Herald Group, the agency's largest prospective partner, had been in quiet contact specifically because of groundwork I had laid 18 months earlier. Work I had done, that Callum had presented as collaborative in meetings, but had been in the actual partnership notes, attributed primarily to my strategic vision. They offered me the account, and the title that came with leading it, the role Callum had been quietly positioning himself for. I accepted it on a Tuesday, exactly 1 year after I signed for a package that was never meant for me to see. I want to leave you with this. Not a lesson. Life is too individual for lessons, but a question. How many things in your life right now are you explaining away? Not because the explanation is satisfying, but because the alternative requires a courage you're not sure you have yet. I was that person. I filed the edges smooth myself. I handed him the benefit of the doubt like it cost me nothing. The package didn't change who he was. It just finally made me stop negotiating with what I already knew. Pay attention to what changes. Pay attention to what stops being easy. Pay attention to the return address. If this story reached something in you, if you've sat with your own version of that quiet wrongness and talked yourself out of it, then you are exactly who this channel is for. Subscribe. Share this with someone who needs to hear it today. Leave me a comment. Have you ever had a gut feeling you talked yourself out of? I read every single one. See you in the next one.